The September morning was bright and warm when Minji Kim walked through the tall iron gates of Hamilton Academy. Her backpack was old and patched in several places. Her shoes were clean but worn at the edges. She had scrubbed them the night before until her hands hurt. The other students walked past her in groups, laughing and talking. Their uniforms were crisp and new. Their bags had famous brand names on them. Some carried expensive coffee drinks. Others checked phones that cost more than Minji's mother earned in a month. Minji kept her eyes down and walked faster. She had earned this scholarship through hard work. She had scored the highest marks in the entire district on the entrance exam. But standing here now, surrounded by wealth she had only seen on television, she felt small. She felt like everyone could see that she did not belong. The main building was beautiful. Tall windows let in streams of golden light. The floors were polished marble that reflected everything like a mirror. Oil paintings of past principals hung on the walls in heavy gold frames. Minji found her classroom on the second floor. Room 204, Advanced Calculus with Mrs. Patricia Thornton. She entered quietly and chose a seat near the back. The other students barely looked at her. They were too busy talking about their summer vacations. One girl described her trip to Paris. A boy complained that his parents only bought him a new car instead of the sports car he wanted. Minji opened her notebook. The pages were recycled from last year. She had carefully erased all her old notes to use the paper again. The bell rang. The door opened. Mrs. Patricia Thornton walked in with sharp, clicking steps. She was a tall woman with gray hair pulled back tight. She wore a dark blue suit and carried a leather folder. Her eyes were cold and calculating as they swept across the room. When those eyes landed on Minji, they stopped. Something changed in Mrs. Thornton's expression. It was subtle. A small tightening around her mouth, a slight narrowing of her eyes. "Good morning, class," Mrs. Thornton said. Her voice was crisp and formal. "I am Mrs. Thornton. I have been teaching mathematics at Hamilton Academy for 20 years. I maintain very high standards. I do not accept excuses. I do not tolerate laziness." She walked to her desk and opened her folder. She pulled out a sheet of paper. "We have a new student today," Mrs. Thornton said. She looked at the paper and frowned. Minji? How exactly do you pronounce this?" Minji felt her face grow warm. "It's Minji, Mrs. Thornton. Minji. Like the two English words min and ji together." "Minji," Mrs. Thornton repeated, but she said it wrong on purpose. She made it sound harsh and foreign. "Well, Minji, I hope you can keep up with our standards here. This is an advanced class. We move very quickly." Several students turned to look at Minji. Some looked curious. Others looked uncomfortable. One girl rolled her eyes and turned back around. Mrs. Thornton began the lesson. She wrote equations on the board with quick, aggressive strokes. She spoke rapidly, using complex terms without much explanation. Minji followed easily. She had taught herself calculus 2 years ago from library books. She had already studied everything Mrs. Thornton was teaching. In fact, she had gone much further. She had worked through college-level textbooks on her own. After 30 minutes, Mrs. Thornton stopped writing. She turned to face the class. "Now let's see what you remember from previous years," she said. She handed out thick packets of problems. "You have the rest of the period to complete as many as you can. This will show me where everyone stands." She moved down each row, placing packets on desks. When she reached Minji, she paused. Then she reached into her folder and pulled out a different packet. It was thinner. The pages looked different. "Here you go, Minji," Mrs. Thornton said loudly. Several students looked up. "I'm giving you some easier problems to start with, just so you don't get overwhelmed on your first day. We wouldn't want you to struggle too much trying to keep up with our standards here." Minji looked at the packet. The problems were simple. They were basic algebra, not calculus. These were problems she could have solved when she was 12 years old. She felt anger rise in her chest, but she pushed it down. She had learned to stay calm. Getting angry never helped. "Thank you, Mrs. Thornton," Minji said quietly. Mrs. Thornton smiled. It was not a kind smile. "You're welcome, dear." Minji opened the easy packet. She picked up her pencil. Around her, the other students were frowning at their papers, working slowly through complex calculus problems. Minji completed her entire worksheet in 7 minutes. Then she sat there, staring at her desk. She could feel Mrs. Thornton watching her from the front of the room. The teacher's eyes moved to her every few seconds. Minji knew what Mrs. Thornton was thinking. She was thinking that Minji was sitting idle because the problems were too hard for her. She was thinking that Minji was lost and confused. Minji made a decision. She opened her backpack and pulled out a blank sheet of paper. Then she picked up the thick calculus packet from the desk next to hers. The boy sitting there had gone to the bathroom. Minji began working through the advanced problems. Her pencil moved quickly across the page. She solved each equation with practiced ease. She worked through derivatives, integrals, and limit problems. She finished the entire advanced packet in 13 minutes. When the boy came back, Minji quietly put his packet back on his desk. She placed her worksheet and her additional work on top of her desk. Then she waited. The bell rang. Mrs. Thornton stood up. "Please pass your papers forward," she said. The students shuffled their packets into piles. The papers made their way to the front. Mrs. Thornton collected them. When she picked up Minji's papers, she saw the thin worksheet on top. She smiled that cold smile again. But then she saw the second sheet underneath. Her smile faded. She picked up the paper and read it carefully. Her face changed. First confusion, then disbelief, then anger. Mrs. Thornton looked up sharply. "Minji, come here, please." The other students were gathering their bags to leave. A few paused to watch. Minji walked to the front of the room. Her heart was beating fast, but she kept her face calm. "Did you complete this?" Mrs. Thornton held up the advanced problem sheet. "Yes, Mrs. Thornton." "All of it?" "Yes." "Where did you get this packet?" "I borrowed it from the student next to me. I finished my assigned worksheet quickly. I didn't want to waste time sitting idle." Mrs. Thornton's jaw tightened. She looked at the paper again. Then she looked at Minji with hard, suspicious eyes. "You copied these answers from someone," Mrs. Thornton said. It was not a question. It was an accusation. Her voice was loud enough for the remaining students to hear. "There is no way you solved all of these problems correctly in such a short time. You must have copied from another student." The room went silent. The students who were leaving stopped at the door. Everyone turned to watch. Minji felt all their eyes on her. She felt the familiar weight of being judged, of being assumed guilty. But this time was different. This time she had proof of her ability. Minji looked directly at Mrs. Thornton. She kept her voice steady and clear. "I did not copy, Mrs. Thornton. I solved every problem myself. If you doubt me, I would be happy to solve any problem on the board right now. You can choose any problem you want. I will show you exactly how I solved it." Mrs. Thornton's face flushed red. The challenge hung in the air between them. The other students whispered to each other. Someone pulled out a phone. The teacher and the students stood facing each other in the quiet classroom, and everyone knew that something important was about to happen. Mrs. Thornton stared at Minji for a long moment. Her face was tight with anger. The students at the door had stopped completely now. They were all watching. Mrs. Thornton could not back down in front of her class. That would make her look weak. But if Minji really could solve the problems, then Mrs. Thornton would look foolish for accusing her. Finally, Mrs. Thornton walked to the board. She picked up a marker. She wrote out a complex calculus problem with sharp, angry strokes. It was much harder than anything on the worksheet. It involved multiple steps and advanced concepts. She put the cap back on the marker with a snap. "Solve this," Mrs. Thornton said. "Show all your work. Explain every step." Minji walked to the board. She picked up a different colored marker. She studied the problem for a few seconds. Then she began to write. Her hand moved steadily across the board. She broke down the problem into steps. She worked through each part carefully. She showed every calculation. She explained her reasoning in clear, simple words. It took her 4 minutes. When she finished, she stepped back. The answer was correct. More than that, it was elegant. She had used a method that made the problem simpler than it looked. Mrs. Thornton checked the work. She could not find a single mistake. Her face grew darker. "You used an unusual method here," Mrs. Thornton said, pointing at one section. "Where did you learn this technique?" "I taught myself from a college textbook," Minji said. "This method is more efficient. It saves 3 steps compared to the standard approach." One of the students at the door laughed softly. Mrs. Thornton's head snapped toward the sound. The student quickly covered his mouth and looked down. "Fine," Mrs. Thornton said coldly. "You may go to your next class. All of you out." The students filed out quickly. Minji gathered her things and left. As she walked into the hallway, she heard whispers around her. "Did you see that? She solved it so fast." Mrs. Thornton looked so angry. Minji walked to her next class alone. She ate lunch alone in the library. She preferred it that way. The library was quiet and peaceful. The librarian, Miss Rodriguez, was a kind woman, with warm brown eyes and gray-streaked black hair. She smiled at Minji. "You're the new scholarship student, right?" Ms. Rodriguez asked. "Minji?" "Yes," Minji said, grateful that someone pronounced her name correctly. "I heard you're very talented in mathematics. If you ever need any books or resources, just ask. We can order materials from the university library, too." "Thank you," Minji said. "That's very kind." Minji sat at a corner table. She opened her lunch. A simple sandwich and an apple. She had made it herself that morning while her mother slept. Her mother worked 2 jobs. She cleaned offices at night and worked at a grocery store during the day. She was always tired, always worried, always working to give Minji a better life. While eating, Minji pulled out a book. It was an advanced mathematics textbook, college level. She had borrowed it from the public library. She was reading about differential equations. The concepts fascinated her. They were like puzzles that explained how the world worked. "That's pretty advanced reading for lunchtime." Minji looked up. A boy stood next to her table. He had a friendly smile. He was tall with dark hair and glasses. He wore the expensive school uniform like everyone else, but something about him seemed different, less arrogant, more genuine. "I'm David Park," he said. "I'm in your calculus class." "That was impressive what you did. Mrs. Thornton never admits when she's wrong. You really showed her." "I just solved a math problem," Minji said quietly. "It was more than that." David sat down across from her without asking. Everyone saw what happened. "She gave you an easy worksheet on purpose. She tried to embarrass you, and you proved her wrong." Minji did not say anything. She did not know if she could trust this boy. Maybe he was trying to trick her somehow. "Look," David said, his voice becoming serious. "I need to tell you something. Mrs. Thornton has done this before. To other students who are minorities or scholarship students. My cousin went to this school 2 years ago. He was Mexican. Mrs. Thornton made his life so hard that he transferred to another school. She's been teaching here for 20 years and the school never does anything about it." "Why are you telling me this?" Minji asked. "Because you're different. My cousin was smart but not like you. You're brilliant. Like really brilliant. And you're not afraid to stand up for yourself. Maybe you can actually make a change." David paused. "Also, my family is Korean too. 2nd generation. I know what it's like to deal with teachers who have already decided you don't belong before you even open your mouth." Minji studied him. He seemed sincere. She made a small decision to trust him, at least a little. "Thank you for the warning," she said. "No problem. If you ever need anything, let me know." "I'm serious," David stood up. "Also, you should join the math club. We meet on Thursdays after school." He walked away before Minji could respond. She watched him go, feeling a strange mix of emotions. She had expected Hamilton Academy to be hostile. She had prepared herself for that. But she had not expected anyone to be kind. Kindness was more confusing than hostility. The rest of the day passed slowly. Minji went to her other classes, English, history, chemistry. The teachers were formal but fair. None of them treated her badly, but none of them were particularly welcoming either. She was invisible to them. Just another student in a room full of students. When the final bell rang, Minji walked home. It took her 45 minutes. She could not afford the bus fare every day, so she saved it for rainy days. The walk took her through the wealthy neighborhood around the school, then gradually into areas that grew poorer and more run down. By the time she reached her apartment building, the houses were small and old. The streets had potholes, trash gathered in the corners. Minji climbed 3 flights of stairs to apartment 3C. She unlocked the door and entered. The apartment was tiny. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a small kitchen, and a living room barely big enough for a couch. But it was clean. Minji made sure of that. She cleaned every day. Her mother was not home yet. She would not be home for several more hours. Minji made herself a snack and sat at the small kitchen table. She pulled out her homework. She finished it all in 30 minutes. Then she pulled out her advanced textbooks and began studying topics far beyond what Hamilton Academy taught. She studied until her eyes hurt and her hand cramped from writing. She studied until the sun went down and the apartment grew dark. She studied because learning was the only way out. The only way to build a different life. A better life. At 9 o'clock, her mother came home. She looked exhausted. Her name was Suna Kim. She was a small woman with tired eyes and hands rough from work, but when she saw Minji, she smiled. "How was your first day?" her mother asked in Korean. "It was fine, Mom," Minji replied in the same language. "Did you make friends?" "Maybe one." "And the teachers? Are they good?" Minji hesitated. She did not want to worry her mother. Her mother already carried so much weight on her shoulders. "They're fine," Minji said. "One of them gave us a hard math problem today. I solved it," her mother's eyes shone with pride. "Of course you did. You're the smartest person I know." They ate a simple dinner together, rice, vegetables, and a small piece of fish. While they ate, Minji's mother told her about work. About the rude customer at the grocery store. About the broken vacuum at the office building. Normal things, safe things. Later, Minji lay in bed in the tiny bedroom she had to herself. Her mother slept on the couch in the living room. She had insisted that Minji have the bedroom for studying. Minji stared at the ceiling in the darkness. She thought about Mrs. Thornton's face when she solved that problem. The anger. The disbelief. The refusal to accept what was right in front of her eyes. Minji knew this was just the beginning. Mrs. Thornton would not give up so easily. Teachers like her never did. They found new ways to tear you down. More subtle ways. Ways that were harder to prove. But Minji had faced hard things before. Poverty. Hunger. Watching her mother work until she could barely stand. She had survived all of that. She could survive Mrs. Thornton. The next morning, Minji returned to Hamilton Academy. She walked into calculus class with her head up. Mrs. Thornton was already there, writing on the board. When Minji entered, the teacher did not look at her. She did not acknowledge her at all. It was like Minji did not exist. The lesson began. Mrs. Thornton taught about advanced integration techniques. When she asked questions, she called on every student except Minji. Even when Minji raised her hand, Mrs. Thornton's eyes slid past her as if she were invisible. At the end of class, Mrs. Thornton made an announcement. "There is a major project due in 4 weeks," she said. "You will analyze a complex mathematical theorem and present your findings to the class. This project is worth 30% of your grade." She handed out assignment sheets. When she reached Minji, she placed the paper on her desk without looking at her. "Each student has been assigned a different theorem," Mrs. Thornton continued. "The difficulty level matches each student's ability level." Minji looked at her assignment sheet. Her stomach sank. Her theorem was one of the most complex in all of mathematics. It was graduate-level work. It would take weeks of intense research just to understand it, let alone analyze it and present it. She looked around. The other students had much simpler assignments. Standard calculus theorems that could be researched in a few hours. For the next 3 weeks, Minji lived and breathed her project. Every spare moment was dedicated to understanding the complex theorem Mrs. Thornton had assigned. She spent hours in the library after school. Ms. Rodriguez helped her access university databases and research papers. She borrowed graduate-level textbooks from the public library. She watched online lectures from famous mathematicians. The theorem was called the Riemann hypothesis extension. Even professional mathematicians struggled with it. Some of the smartest people in the world had worked on it for decades, and Mrs. Thornton expected a 16-year-old girl to analyze and present it in 4 weeks. But Minji loved it. The challenge excited her. Every night she stayed up late, working through equations by the dim light of her desk lamp. Her mother worried. She said Minji looked tired, that she was working too hard. But Minji could not stop. The mathematics pulled her forward like gravity. David checked on her every day at lunch. He brought her snacks from the cafeteria. He told her about the other students and their simple projects. Most of them were spending a few hours on basic research and making colorful posters. They were treating it like a casual assignment. "You know she's trying to make you fail, right?" David said one day. "I know," Minji replied, not looking up from her notes. "So why are you killing yourself over this? Just do a basic presentation like everyone else. You don't have to prove anything." Minji looked up at him. "Yes, I do. If I do a basic presentation, she'll say I couldn't handle the challenge. If I do nothing, she wins. The only way forward is to do the impossible." David shook his head, but he was smiling. "You're kind of amazing, you know that?" "I'm just stubborn," Minji said. "Same thing sometimes." As the weeks passed, Mrs. Thornton continued her campaign of subtle hostility. She ignored Minji in class. She marked Minji's homework harder than anyone else's. Small mistakes that she overlooked in other students' work became major errors in Minji's. When Minji's scores came back, they were always lower than they should be, not low enough to be obvious discrimination, just low enough to hurt. But Minji kept working. She filled 3 notebooks with calculations and analysis. She created detailed diagrams explaining the theorem's implications. She found connections that even some published papers had missed. She prepared a presentation that would make university professors sit up and take notice. Finally, the day came. Presentation day. Mrs. Thornton had scheduled the presentations over 2 weeks. She saved Minji for last. The very last presentation on the very last day. Maximum pressure. Maximum opportunity to fail. The other students gave their presentations. They were fine. Adequate. They read from note cards and showed simple posters. They explained basic concepts that everyone in an advanced calculus class already understood. Mrs. Thornton praised them. She gave them high scores. She smiled and nodded encouragingly. Then came Minji's turn. It was a Friday afternoon, the last class of the day, the last presentation of the unit. Everyone was tired and ready to go home. Mrs. Thornton probably hoped that Minji would fail in front of a bored, impatient audience. Minji walked to the front of the class. She had dressed carefully that morning. Her clothes were still old and worn, but they were clean and pressed. She had tied her hair back neatly. She looked professional, serious. She connected her borrowed laptop to the projector. She had created a digital presentation, not because she had money for fancy equipment, but because Ms. Rodriguez had let her use the library computers after school for weeks. My presentation is on an extension of the Riemann hypothesis, Minji began. Her voice was clear and steady. This theorem deals with the distribution of prime numbers and has implications for number theory, cryptography, and computer science. She clicked to the next slide. It showed a complex equation. Some students groaned quietly. This was already over their heads, but Minji did something clever. She broke down the complex idea into simple pieces. She used analogies that anyone could understand. She explained prime numbers like they were rare treasures scattered across an infinite beach. She described the theorem like a map that helped you find those treasures. She made the impossible accessible. Mrs. Thornton's face grew darker with each slide. This was not supposed to happen. Minji was supposed to fumble and fail. Instead, she was teaching the class things that Mrs. Thornton herself barely understood. Minji moved through her presentation with confidence. She showed her original analysis. She pointed out patterns that existed in the mathematics. She even identified a small error in one of the published papers she had studied and explained how to correct it. The students were leaning forward now. Even the ones who normally did not care about math were paying attention. This was not a boring lecture. This was someone their own age doing something extraordinary. Minji reached her conclusion. She summarized her findings. She explained the real-world applications of understanding this theorem. She finished exactly at the 30-minute mark. Not a second over. There was silence in the room. Then one student started clapping. Then another, then more. Soon the whole class was applauding. Even students who had ignored Minji for weeks were clapping. David was grinning and clapping loudly. Mrs. Thornton sat at her desk with a frozen expression. She did not clap. She did not smile. She just stared at Minji with cold, hard eyes. "Thank you, Minji," Mrs. Thornton said, pronouncing the name wrong again on purpose. "That was adequate. Though I have to say your presentation skills need work. You spoke a bit too fast. Your slides were too dense, and I question whether you truly understood some of the deeper implications of the theorem." The clapping stopped. Students looked at each other in confusion. The presentation had been brilliant. Everyone knew it. How could Mrs. Thornton say it was just adequate? "What grade did I receive?" Minji asked. Mrs. Thornton wrote something in her gradebook. "I'll give you a B-." The content was acceptable, but the presentation skills were lacking, as I mentioned. "A B-," David said loudly. He stood up from his desk. "That's not fair. Her presentation was better than everyone else's. She actually taught us something new." "Mr. Park, sit down," Mrs. Thornton said sharply. "I am the teacher. I determine the grades. Minji's content may have been complex, but complexity is not the same as quality, and her presentation skills were genuinely weak." "But you gave everyone else A's and B's for reading off note cards," another student said. "A girl named Sarah. Minji actually knew what she was talking about." "That's enough," Mrs. Thornton snapped. Class dismissed. Everyone out now. The students gathered their things slowly. They kept looking at Minji with sympathy and at Mrs. Thornton with disbelief. As they filed out, several students patted Minji on the shoulder or gave her encouraging looks. David waited for her at the door. "This is wrong," he said. "You should report her." "Who would I report her to?" Minji asked. "The principal? The school board? They've let her teach here for 20 years. They know what she does. Then what are you going to do?" Minji looked back at Mrs. Thornton, who was erasing the board with angry strokes. "I don't know yet. But I'm not giving up." That weekend, something unexpected happened. On Monday morning, there was an announcement during homeroom. Hamilton Academy would be sending 3 students to compete in the Regional Mathematics Olympiad. It was a prestigious competition. The winner would receive a $10,000 scholarship and recognition from universities across the country. Mrs. Thornton was in charge of selecting the students and coaching them. She announced her choices during calculus class that afternoon. "Our 3 representatives will be Marcus Whitley, Jennifer Chen, and Robert Thompson," she said. "These students have shown consistent excellence in mathematics. I'll be holding practice sessions after school twice a week to prepare them." Marcus was the principal's son. Jennifer and Robert were both from wealthy families. They were good students, but not exceptional. Everyone in class knew that Minji was better than all 3 of them combined. Sarah raised her hand. "Mrs. Thornton, why isn't Minji competing? She's the best math student in our class." "That's my decision to make, Miss Williams," Mrs. Thornton said coldly. "The Olympiad requires not just mathematical knowledge, but also the ability to perform under pressure and represent our school well. I've made my selections based on overall performance and presentation skills." It was a direct insult. Mrs. Thornton was saying that Minji was not good enough to represent Hamilton Academy, that her presentation skills were too weak, that she would embarrass the school. Minji sat in her seat staring at her desk. She felt anger burning in her chest. Not just anger at Mrs. Thornton, but anger at the whole system, at the unfairness of it all. She had worked harder than anyone. She had proven herself over and over, and still it was not enough. After class, David caught up with her in the hallway. "This is insane. You have to do something." "Like what?" Minji asked. She was trying not to cry. She would not give Mrs. Thornton the satisfaction of seeing her cry. "I don't know. Talk to another teacher? Go to the principal? The principal's son just got chosen for the team. You think he'll help me?" David had no answer for that. That afternoon, Minji went to the library. She sat at her usual corner table trying to focus on homework. But she could not concentrate. Her mind kept returning to the Olympiad. Minji threw herself into preparation. She found practice Olympiad problems online and worked through them every night. She woke up early before school to study. She used every free moment to sharpen her skills. Ms. Rodriguez gave her access to old competition materials and connected her with a retired math professor who volunteered to answer questions via email. Meanwhile, Mrs. Thornton's coaching sessions were happening twice a week after school. Minji could see Marcus, Jennifer, and Robert leaving together with Mrs. Thornton. They carried folders full of practice materials. They talked about strategies and techniques. They had every advantage, but Minji had something they did not have. She had hunger. She had a reason to win that went beyond pride or college applications. This was her chance to prove that poverty and prejudice could not stop real talent. This was her chance to show everyone, including herself, that she belonged. 2 weeks before the competition, David approached her at lunch with news. "I heard Mrs. Thornton talking to another teacher," he said quietly. "She knows you registered for the Olympiad." "She's not happy about it. How did she find out?" Minji asked. "The competition organizers sent a list of all registered students to every school. Your name was on the list under independent competitors." Minji felt a chill. "What did she say?" "She said it was inappropriate for you to compete without school support. She said you were going to embarrass yourself and make Hamilton Academy look bad by association since you're still a student here." "I'm not representing the school. I'm competing independently, I know, but that doesn't matter to her. She sees it as you challenging her authority." David paused. "Be careful, Minji. She's going to come after you harder now." He was right. The very next day, Mrs. Thornton called Minji to stay after class. "I understand you've registered for the Mathematics Olympiad," Mrs. Thornton said. Her voice was cold and controlled. "Yes, ma'am. As an independent competitor, I see. And you think you're prepared for this level of competition? I'm preparing as well as I can. Mrs. Thornton smiled that terrible smile. I want to be clear about something, Minji. When you fail at this competition, and you will fail, it reflects on this school. People will see that you're a Hamilton Academy student, and they'll judge us based on your performance. I'm not representing the school officially, Minji said. That's a technicality. You attend here? That's enough. Mrs. Thornton leaned back in her chair. I'm also concerned about your recent performance in my class. Your homework scores have been declining. Your participation has been minimal. I'm worried that you're too distracted by this competition to focus on your actual schoolwork. Minji felt anger rising. My homework has been perfect. Every assignment, perfect according to you. But I grade on more than just correct answers. I grade on methodology, presentation, and understanding of underlying concepts. Your recent work has been lacking in all those areas. It was a lie. They both knew it. But Mrs. Thornton held all the power. She controlled the grades. She wrote the evaluations. She could make Minji's life miserable and never face any consequences. Is there anything else, Mrs. Thornton? Minji asked. Just one more thing. I'll be assigning a major homework project this week. It will be due the day after the Olympiad. It will require extensive research and work. I want to make sure all my students, including you, maintain their focus on classwork despite outside distractions. Minji understood. Mrs. Thornton was sabotaging her preparation time. She was assigning a huge project due right after the competition to force Minji to divide her attention. If Minji focused only on the Olympiad, she would fail the project. If she focused on both, she would be exhausted and underprepared for the competition. I understand, Minji said quietly. Good. You're dismissed. Minji left the classroom feeling defeated. She went to the library and told Ms. Rodriguez what happened. That's deliberate interference, Ms. Rodriguez said angrily. She's trying to sabotage you, but there's nothing I can do about it. She's the teacher. She can assign whatever she wants. Ms. Rodriguez thought for a moment. What if we document everything? Every unfair grade, every unusual assignment, every instance of discrimination. If we have a record, we can report it properly. Who would we report it to? Minji asked again. Everyone knows what she's like. No one cares. I care, Ms. Rodriguez said firmly. And I'm not the only one. There are teachers here who are uncomfortable with how Mrs. Thornton operates. We just need proof. Real, documented proof. That evening, David sent Minji a text message. He had created a shared document online. He had started writing down everything he had witnessed in Mrs. Thornton's class. Every time she mispronounced Minji's name on purpose. Every unfair grade. Every instance of ignoring Minji while calling on other students. He had noted dates and specific incidents. Other students started adding to the document too. Sarah wrote about how Mrs. Thornton gave Minji the impossible theorem project while giving everyone else simple assignments. Another student named Alex described how Mrs. Thornton praised his mediocre presentation while criticizing Minji's excellent one. Even students who barely knew Minji were contributing because they recognized injustice when they saw it. But documentation was not enough to stop what was happening now. Minji still had to prepare for the Olympiad while completing Mrs. Thornton's sabotage project. She barely slept. She worked on math competition problems until midnight, then switched to the homework project until 3 in the morning. She woke up at 6 to study more before school. Her mother noticed. You're working too hard, she said in Korean. You look sick. I'm fine, Mom, Minji replied. But she was not fine. She was exhausted. Her eyes hurt. Her hands trembled when she wrote. The day of the Olympiad arrived. It was a Saturday in early November. The competition was being held at a large university 2 hours away. Ms. Rodriguez drove Minji there in her own car. She had volunteered to take her since Minji's mother had to work and could not afford to take time off. They arrived at the university campus. The building where the competition was held was impressive. Tall stone columns, wide marble steps. Inside, hundreds of students gathered. They wore shirts representing their schools. Many had coaches with them going over last-minute strategies. Minji saw Marcus, Jennifer, and Robert with Mrs. Thornton. They were wearing matching Hamilton Academy shirts. They had folders full of materials. Mrs. Thornton was talking to them, pointing at papers, explaining something. Mrs. Thornton looked up and saw Minji. Their eyes met across the crowded lobby. Mrs. Thornton's expression was cold and satisfied. She thought Minji would fail. She was counting on it. Minji looked away. She found her assigned seat in the competition hall. The room was huge with rows and rows of desks. Each desk had a number. Minji was number 247. She sat down and took out her pencils. She had 3 sharp pencils and 1 eraser. That was all she needed. The proctor explained the rules. The competition had 3 rounds. Each round was 2 hours long with increasingly difficult problems. Only the top scores from each round advanced. The final round would determine the winner. The first round began. Minji opened her test booklet. The problems were challenging but not impossible. She had seen similar problems in her practice. She worked steadily, checking each answer twice. She finished with 20 minutes to spare and used the time to review her work. When time was called, she felt confident. She had gotten all the problems correct. She was sure of it. During the break, Ms. Rodriguez bought her a sandwich and water. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Good. The first round was manageable." "That's my girl." The second round was harder, much harder. Problems that required multiple steps and creative thinking. Problems that tested not just knowledge but intuition and insight. Minji lost herself in the mathematics. The exhaustion faded. The stress disappeared. There was only the pure beauty of problem solving. She worked until her hand cramped. She worked until the numbers and symbols swam before her eyes. But she found the answers. One by one, she unlocked each problem. When the second round ended, she was less confident. Some of those problems had been extremely difficult. She might have made mistakes. The scores were posted an hour later. The top 20 from each round would advance to the finals. Minji scanned the list nervously. There was her number, 247. She had placed 3rd in the second round, 3rd out of 300 competitors. She had advanced to the finals, her heart soared. She looked for the Hamilton Academy team. Marcus had barely made it into the finals at 20th place. Jennifer had not advanced. Robert had not advanced. Mrs. Thornton stood with her 2 remaining students, looking pale and angry. She saw Minji looking at the scores. Their eyes met again. This time, Mrs. Thornton's expression showed something new. Fear. She was starting to understand that Minji might actually win. The final round was scheduled for after lunch. Only 20 students remained. They gathered in a smaller room. The atmosphere was tense. These were the best young mathematicians in the region. Everyone wanted that scholarship. Everyone wanted the recognition. Minji sat at her desk and closed her eyes. She thought about her mother working at the grocery store right now. Tired feet, aching back, forced smile for rude customers. She thought about their tiny apartment, the bills stacked on the kitchen counter, the worry that never left her mother's eyes. The local newspaper ran a story about Minji's victory on Monday morning. The headline read, "Scholarship Student Wins Regional Mathematics Olympiad with Perfect Score." The article included a photo of Minji holding her trophy. It mentioned that she was a student at Hamilton Academy. It talked about her background, how she had prepared independently without a coach, how she had overcome poverty to achieve excellence. By the time Minji arrived at school, everyone had seen the article. Students she had never spoken to congratulated her in the hallways. Teachers she barely knew smiled at her. The principal stopped her between classes and shook her hand in front of everyone. "Wonderful achievement, Miss Kim," Principal Whitley said loudly. "Hamilton Academy is so proud of you." Minji wanted to laugh. Hamilton Academy had done nothing to help her. Mrs. Thornton had actively tried to stop her, but she just smiled politely and said, "Thank you, sir." When she walked into calculus class, the room went quiet. Every student turned to look at her. Then Sarah started clapping. David joined in. Soon the whole class was applauding. Even students who had ignored her all semester were clapping. Mrs. Thornton sat at her desk, not clapping. Her face was tight and expressionless. When the applause died down, she stood up. "Let's begin today's lesson," she said coldly. No congratulations, no acknowledgement of Minji's achievement. Nothing. The class proceeded normally, but something had changed. Mrs. Thornton could no longer pretend that Minji was incompetent. The evidence was too public now. A perfect score in a regional competition, first place out of 300 students. It was undeniable. But that did not mean Mrs. Thornton would give up. After class, she called Minji to her desk. "I hope you haven't forgotten about your homework project, Mrs. Thornton said. "It's due tomorrow. I trust that your extracurricular activities haven't prevented you from completing your actual schoolwork." Minji felt her stomach drop. In the excitement of the competition and the exhaustion that followed, she had not finished the project. She had worked on it, but it was not complete. She needed at least another full day. "I need an extension," Minji said. "I've been focused on the Olympiad." "I don't give extensions," Mrs. Thornton said. "The deadline was clear from the beginning. You chose to prioritize a competition over your academic responsibilities. That was your choice. Now you must face the consequences. You assigned this project specifically to interfere with my preparation," Minji said. The words came out before she could stop them. "You knew the Olympiad was coming. You made the deadline right after it on purpose." Mrs. Thornton's eyes went cold. "That's a very serious accusation. Do you have any proof of this supposed conspiracy against you?" Minji did not answer. They both knew she had no proof that would matter to the administration. "I thought not," Mrs. Thornton continued. "The project is due tomorrow. If you don't submit it, you'll receive a 0. That will significantly impact your grade in this class. Good afternoon, Minji." Minji left the classroom feeling defeated. She had won the Olympiad, but was going to fail a homework assignment. The injustice of it burned in her chest. That evening, she worked on the project until dawn. She did not sleep at all. She completed it running on pure determination and too much coffee. At 7 in the morning, she printed it at the library. Her eyes were red. Her hands were shaking. But she had finished. She submitted the project during class. Mrs. Thornton took it without a word. 2 days later, Mrs. Thornton returned the graded projects. Everyone got their papers back except Minji. When class ended, Mrs. Thornton called her to the desk. "Your project was problematic," Mrs. Thornton said. She handed the paper to Minji. The grade at the top was D-. The paper was covered in red marks. Comments like unclear reasoning, insufficient analysis, and poor presentation filled the margins. Minji looked at the grade in disbelief. She had worked so hard. The project was good. Maybe not her best work because of the time pressure, but certainly not D-level work. "This grade is unfair," Minji said. Her voice shook. "I completed all the requirements. My analysis was thorough." "I disagree. The work was rushed and substandard. If you had managed your time better instead of focusing on outside competitions, perhaps you would have produced better work. You're punishing me for winning the Olympiad. I'm grading your work according to the same standards I apply to everyone. That's not true. You've been treating me differently since my first day." Mrs. Thornton leaned back in her chair. "Miss Kim, let me give you some advice. You may have some natural mathematical ability, but ability means nothing without discipline, respect for authority, and professional presentation skills. You have none of those qualities. You got lucky in one competition. That doesn't make you special." Minji felt tears threatening but refused to let them fall. "I'm reporting this to the principal." "Go ahead," Mrs. Thornton said. She sounded almost pleased. "Tell Principal Whitley that you're upset about a grade. Tell him that you think I'm treating you unfairly. See how that works out for you." The meeting with Principal Whitley happened the next day. Minji brought her project, her graded papers from throughout the semester, and the documentation that David and other students had compiled. She also brought Ms. Rodriguez for support. Principal Whitley was a tall man with silver hair and an expensive suit. He listened to Minji's complaint with a polite but distant expression. When she finished, he sighed. "Miss Kim, I understand you're upset, but Mrs. Thornton has been teaching here for 20 years. She's one of our most experienced educators. I can't simply override her professional judgment on grading." "This isn't about one grade," Ms. Rodriguez interjected. "This is a pattern of discriminatory behavior. Look at this documentation. Multiple students have witnessed it." Principal Whitley glanced at the papers. "These are just student observations. They're biased and subjective. Students often think teachers are being unfair when they're simply being held to high standards. She gave me an impossible theorem to analyze while giving other students simple projects, Minji said. She refused to let me join the Olympiad team even though I'm the best math student. She scheduled a major project for right after the competition to sabotage my preparation. This is deliberate. Or, Principal Whitley said carefully, Mrs. Thornton recognized your exceptional ability and challenged you accordingly. Perhaps she thought you could handle more difficult material. As for the Olympiad team, teachers have discretion in making those selections, and regarding project deadlines, those are set weeks in advance. I'm sure Mrs. Thornton wasn't specifically targeting you. She mispronounces my name on purpose, Minji said. Every single day. Perhaps she just has difficulty with Korean names. That's not discrimination. That's just an honest mistake. Minji felt her hope crumbling. The principal was not going to help her. He was protecting Mrs. Thornton. So you're not going to do anything? Ms. Rodriguez asked. I'll speak with Mrs. Thornton about being more mindful of diverse learning needs, Principal Whitley said. But I can't change grades or make personnel decisions based on student complaints alone. I'm sorry, but my hands are tied. After they left his office, Ms. Rodriguez was furious. That was completely inadequate. He's protecting her because she's been here longer than him. She probably has political connections on the school board. So, what do I do? Minji asked. She felt exhausted and defeated. Just accept it? No. We escalate. We go above his head. To who? The school board, the district superintendent. If necessary, the media. Ms. Rodriguez put a hand on Minji's shoulder. But I need to be honest with you. This could get messy. It could get public. Are you prepared for that? Minji thought about it. Making this public meant risking retaliation. It meant attention she did not want. It meant her mother worrying even more. But what was the alternative? Let Mrs. Thornton continue? Let her drive away the next poor student, the next minority student, the next person who dared to challenge her? Before Minji could answer, her phone buzzed. It was an email. The sender was Professor Chen from State University. She opened it. Dear Miss Kim, the email read, Congratulations on your outstanding performance at the Regional Mathematics Olympiad. I was one of the judges, and I was deeply impressed by your work. I wanted to reach out because several universities are interested in meeting with you to discuss scholarship opportunities. Your perfect score and your background story have caught significant attention in the mathematics community. Would you be available for a video conference next week? Minji showed the email to Ms. Rodriguez. The librarian's eyes widened. Do you understand what this means? Ms. Rodriguez said. You have leverage now. You have outside recognition. Mrs. Thornton can't touch that. That same day, 2 more emails arrived. One from another university, one from a mathematics foundation offering a summer research opportunity. Then a local news station called the school, asking to interview Minji about her Olympiad victory. Suddenly, Minji was not just a poor scholarship student that Mrs. Thornton could quietly crush. She was becoming a story, a symbol of talent overcoming adversity, and Hamilton Academy's treatment of her was part of that story. Principal Whitley called Minji back to his office the next morning. His attitude had changed. He was smiling now, almost nervous. Miss Kim, I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday. The school board meeting was scheduled for 3 weeks after the story broke on social media. In those 3 weeks, everything changed. The local newspaper did a full investigation. They interviewed former Hamilton Academy students who had similar experiences with Mrs. Thornton. A young man named Carlos. Martinez described how she had driven him out of her class 5 years ago with constant criticism and impossible standards. A girl named Keisha Washington talked about how Mrs. Thornton always assumed she needed extra help, despite having top grades. Pattern after pattern emerged. Mrs. Thornton had been doing this for years and the school had done nothing. The story went beyond local news. A regional education blog picked it up, then a national education website. Suddenly people across the country were talking about Minji Kim, the scholarship student who won a mathematics Olympiad despite her teacher trying to stop her. Universities reached out with scholarship offers. Mathematics organizations invited her to conferences. A famous mathematician tweeted about her, calling her the future of American mathematics, if we're smart enough to support her. Mrs. Thornton was placed on paid administrative leave while the school board conducted their investigation. Principal Whitley issued a statement saying the school took all allegations seriously and was committed to providing a fair and equitable learning environment for all students. It was carefully worded to admit nothing while sounding concerned. The school board meeting was held in the district office auditorium. It was open to the public. Over 200 people attended. Parents, students, teachers, community members, and reporters filled every seat. News cameras lined the back wall. Minji sat in the front row with her mother and Ms. Rodriguez. Her mother had taken the evening off work, losing wages she could not afford to lose. But she insisted on being there. She wore her best dress and held Minji's hand tightly. David sat behind them with Sarah, Alex, and a dozen other students who had come to support Minji and testify if needed. They had all dressed formally. They all looked nervous but determined. The school board consisted of 7 members. They sat at a long table at the front of the room. The superintendent, Dr. Margaret Foster, sat in the center. She was a stern-looking woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. Dr. Foster called the meeting to order. She explained that they had conducted a thorough investigation into the allegations against Mrs. Patricia Thornton. They had reviewed documents, interviewed witnesses, and examined grading patterns. "We take these allegations very seriously," Dr. Foster said. "Hamilton Academy has a responsibility to provide equal educational opportunities to all students, regardless of their background. We will not tolerate discrimination in any form." Then she invited Minji to present her case. Minji walked to the microphone at the center of the room. Her legs felt weak, but she kept walking. She had prepared a statement. She had practiced it a dozen times. But now, standing in front of all these people with cameras pointing at her, her mind went blank. She looked back at her mother. Her mother nodded encouragingly. Minji took a breath and began to speak. "My name is Minji Kim," she said. Her voice was quiet at first, then grew stronger. "I'm a junior at Hamilton Academy. I'm a scholarship student from a low-income family. I love mathematics. I've loved it since I was a little girl. When I got accepted to Hamilton Academy, I was so excited. I thought it was my chance to learn from the best teachers and be challenged at the highest level." She paused. "But from my first day in Mrs. Thornton's class, she treated me differently. She mispronounced my name on purpose even after I corrected her. She gave me easier work than other students, assuming I couldn't handle advanced material. When I proved I could do the work, she accused me of cheating. She graded my assignments harder than everyone else's. She gave me an extremely difficult project while giving other students simple ones. She blocked me from joining the school Olympiad team even though I was the best student in her class." Minji's voice wavered slightly. "When I registered for the competition independently, she assigned a major project due right after it to sabotage my preparation. When I won the competition anyway with a perfect score, she gave me a D on that project. Not because the work was bad, but because I had succeeded despite her trying to stop me." She looked directly at the school board. "This isn't just about me. Mrs. Thornton has done this to other students. Students of color, poor students, students who she thinks don't belong at Hamilton Academy, and the school has known about it for years and done nothing. I'm asking you to do something now, not just for me, for every student who comes after me." Minji returned to her seat. The room was completely silent. Then David stood up and walked to the microphone. "My name is David Park. I've witnessed everything Minji described. I've documented it. I have dates, specific incidents, and multiple witnesses." He held up a thick folder. "This is a detailed record of Mrs. Thornton's behavior over the past 4 months. Everything is in here." One by one, other students came forward. Sarah described how Mrs. Thornton praised a mediocre presentation from a wealthy student while criticizing Minji's excellent work. Alex talked about Mrs. Thornton ignoring Minji when she raised her hand in class. A senior named Maya testified that Mrs. Thornton had treated her younger sister the same way 3 years ago. Then Ms. Rodriguez spoke. She presented data showing statistical anomalies in Mrs. Thornton's grading patterns. Minority students and scholarship students consistently received lower grades than their white wealthy peers for comparable work. The numbers were damning. Finally, former students testified. Carlos Martinez, now in college, described how Mrs. Thornton's treatment had made him doubt his abilities and almost give up on mathematics entirely. Keisha Washington, working as an engineer, talked about the lasting psychological damage of being constantly told she was not good enough. The testimony went on for 2 hours. The evidence was overwhelming. Mrs. Thornton had engaged in a pattern of discriminatory behavior for years. Multiple students, similar tactics, consistent targeting of vulnerable populations. The school board took a break to deliberate. When they returned, Dr. Foster's expression was grave. "We have reviewed all the evidence presented tonight," she said. "We have also examined Mrs. Thornton's personnel file and previous complaints that were not adequately addressed. The pattern of behavior described here is unacceptable and violates our district's policies on equity and inclusion." She paused. The room held its breath. Effective immediately, Patricia Thornton is terminated from her position at Hamilton Academy. Her teaching license will be revoked, and we will be reporting this matter to the State Education Board. She will not teach in this district or any other district if we have anything to say about it. The room erupted. Some people applauded. Others gasped. Reporters shouted questions. Minji felt her mother squeeze her hand so tightly it hurt. Dr. Foster continued, raising her voice over the noise. "Furthermore, we acknowledge that Hamilton Academy's administration failed to act on previous complaints about Mrs. Thornton's conduct. Principal Whitley will be placed on probation and required to undergo training on handling discrimination complaints. We are also implementing new policies to protect students from discriminatory treatment, including anonymous reporting systems and mandatory bias training for all staff." She looked directly at Minji. "Miss Kim, on behalf of the school board and Hamilton Academy, I apologize. We failed you. We failed other students before you. We should have acted years ago. I hope you will continue your education at Hamilton Academy and allow us the opportunity to do better." Minji nodded, unable to speak. She felt tears running down her face, but she did not care. They were good tears. Relief tears. Victory tears. After the meeting ended, reporters surrounded Minji. They asked her how she felt, what her plans were, what message she had for other students facing discrimination. She answered as best she could, though her mind was still processing what had just happened. A woman pushed through the crowd. She was tall with kind eyes. "Miss Kim, I'm Professor Chen from State University. I was one of the judges at the Olympiad. Could we talk for a moment?" Minji followed her to a quieter corner. Professor Chen smiled warmly. "I wanted to tell you in person that our university is offering you a full scholarship. Tuition, room, board, everything. We have a special program for gifted mathematics students, and we would be honored to have you. But more than that, I wanted to say how impressed I am with your courage. What you did tonight, standing up and telling your truth. That takes as much brilliance as solving any mathematical equation." "Thank you," Minji whispered. "I also want you to know that we're creating a scholarship fund in your name. The Minji Kim Scholarship for students from underrepresented backgrounds who show exceptional promise in mathematics. Your story has inspired a lot of people. We want to make sure other students like you get the support they deserve." Minji could not hold back her tears anymore. She had wanted justice. She had wanted things to change. But she had never imagined this, that her struggle could become something that helped others, that her pain could create opportunity for future students.